And they've been manufacturing them for 30 years. And if you compare the specs of anything comparable in the same price range, it just blows you away. Or the pricing is sometimes, in some cases, like 70% cheaper than these big lines that you're talking about. And when there's a driver for literally every PLC out there, yes, there may be some quirks or, things to change in your development environment, but the software is completely free and people can download it without buying anything.
Welcome to Machine Builder Talk, the podcast where industry leaders, innovators, and visionaries in the industrial machine building world share their insights, challenges, and breakthroughs. Here are your hosts, Colin Cartwright and Craig Henry.
It's Tuesday, and welcome back to another episode of Machine Builder Talk. And here I am, Colin Cartwright in Canada, and Craig looks like he's somewhere else in the world, and I believe it's somewhere in Europe. Where are you, Craig?
I'm in Germany. I am in Stuttgart for the LogiMAT trade show having to do with logistics. I had a 48-hour odyssey to get here because there was a strike from the German, the people that do the flights and the trains here. So it was a joy to spend the night in Philadelphia where I was going to take off. We took off in this plane and they said, oh, there's something wrong. And they turned around and came back and then delayed us 18 hours. Anyway, it's been an odyssey and an epic one at that. But here I am in my hotel room and broke free. It's in the evening, late in the evening here, but I'm so happy to be here because we have a terrific guest and I'll let you introduce her now.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a terrific guest and our first female guest on the show. So we're really excited about that. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce you to Nikki Gonzalez, who is also part of the Automation Ladies podcast. So welcome to the show, Nikki. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, guys. I guess in true Nikki fashion, I'm going to start off on a tangent and then hopefully go back to introducing myself. But I was once stuck on an overpass in France for, I don't know, maybe close to 24 hours when the tunnel workers decided to strike. And we were on a highway overpass waiting to get through the gate to the tunnel, and there was nowhere to go, nowhere to turn around until the strike was over. So I sympathize with your Odyssey, Craig. There's a lot of unknowns in this world now, whether it's supply chains or traveling or any of the above. So
it's
I'm really stoked you made it to do this recording with us, and I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Nikki. And I'm sure your 24 hours in a tunnel was much worse than mine, because to be honest, in that 48 hours, I did just walk across and get a luxury room at the Marriott Hotel, and
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's not so bad. But anyway, wow, yeah, it's crazy, and this is the world we live in, and I travel a lot. But my wife was like, Craig, why don't you just come home? Why are you going to this? and then she understands that there are customers I have to see and new relationships to make.
Yeah.
But Nikki, now we were talking before we started the podcast that now you're a pro in this. You have tools that Colin and I maybe haven't even done. So tell us about Automation Ladies and what you do. Like, give us more.
Right. Sure. Yeah. And Maybe I'll back up a little bit. So I'm like you mentioned, Nikki Gonzalez. Earlier on in my career, some people may remember me from my maiden name. I'm from Iceland, Hallgrimsdóttir or Hallgrímsdóttir. That one's like not very easy to get to know, but hard to forget. So it took me a long time to change my name after I got married, because you know how customer relationships are. Even if you change companies, this industry is small. Your reputation precedes you, right? Customers especially remember if you never sold them the wrong thing, or you try to always steer them in the right direction, that sort of thing. And I really had that reputation built up. I thought I was in Northern California as a sales engineer, outside sales engineer. I started in machine vision with Keyence, laser marking, barcode reading. Then I went over to Festo and did, handling, pneumatics, electromechanical, motion, control. I'm one of those people that can't stop looking up the line or down the line from what I'm doing once I've gotten really good at the one thing. I can't stop myself. I seem to really enjoy myself at the bottom of a steep learning curve, and I swear this connects, but one of those things is like the podcast. So I know you mentioned, Colin's kind of got the producing down here.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I hoodwinked my co-host, Ali G, into doing a podcast with me. The story is now that it was a total bait and switch on my part. I just didn't know, but I told her, I was like, all you're going to have to do is show up. I'll do all the work. I'll produce it. And I think looking back at myself and now having done, I'm in my late 30s, I've done a lot of these like professional personality tests and late stage ADHD diagnosis. I've started to understand a lot more about myself and why I am the way that I am. But one of those things is I really have this huge appetite to constantly try new things. And as the Enneagram personality test will say, I need to try everything twice. Once to see if I can do it, and the second time to see if I actually like it. And podcasting is definitely one of those things that I just dove into head first. I got an idea while I was listening to a podcast called Office Ladies, which is Angela and Pam from The Office. And they're actually best friends in real life. And they have a podcast where they talk about The Office. And I thought to myself, how cool would it be if I had a friend that I could talk about automation with? Because I don't know about you guys, but like in my personal life, when I talk about what I do, most people's eyes glaze over. And
I've got to be somewhere.
Yeah. And I'm a real big nerd for all things automation. And so when I saw that podcasting was a thing in this space, that it was possible, and I don't know, looking at that cover and listening to the Office Ladies, it wasn't as much of like a big, I need to change the industry or I want to represent women. Honestly, it was just like, hey, I want to talk to some girls about automation. And that's how I started the podcast. But it took us about 6 months to get a single episode out because we had no idea what we were doing. And most of these...
What did you do for 6 months? Like, were you...
I recorded a bunch of 2-hour-long therapy sessions with women in the industry.
So it was really therapy.
That required so much editing that it was very hard to put them out there.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's amazing. In fact,
what did you do with those recordings? Did you ever publish those, or are they still like in a drawer somewhere as let's say a bribe?
They're probably in my old Riverside account somewhere sitting. I've got mutually assured destruction on a lot of people in this industry at this point.
Okay. So interesting. So tell us how you got into the automation industry in the first. What was the inspiration? What was the story behind it?
Great question. And that's one of the few questions we ask on our podcast as well, because we find that, this is not a very well-known career path for sure. So my dad is an electrical engineer, and he's been in like more in embedded controls his whole life, doing connected systems, IoT before that was a thing, tracking remote weather stations, tracking ships and vessels, trucks. And I started working for him when I was in middle school. So I moved here to the US in middle school. I didn't have a work permit, so I could babysit or work for my dad. And I did both of those things until I got my green card. And I got to grow up in a small business. I was really lucky to see my dad grow a business, hire salespeople, develop a product. I started by creating the user manuals and then data sheets and then marketing material. And I made my first technical sale of a tracking system for trucks several states away by doing a web demo from a hotel while I was at a trade show. And I didn't know that sales could be like that. It was just problem solving. It was helping somebody that had a problem that didn't exactly know how to solve it with the technology that I had available to me. And so I went to business school because I saw my dad as a CEO. I wanted to do international business. I had moved here from Iceland when I was younger and I wanted to travel. And so I went to the University of Texas. I needed to be able to afford an in-state school. So my dreams of Harvard were squished when I found out how much money you have to have for that as an international student. But I went to UT. I got a degree in international business, which I also found out has no starter career path. If you think about finance or accounting, I mean, there's kind of like some standard entry-level jobs. Nobody hires an international business intern or starting, like, it's one of those things that you use maybe as an executive later on. But I wanted, it was a kind of a catch-all major, which I got to learn a little bit of marketing, a little bit of accounting, a little bit of everything with an international how to do it across borders or different cultures sort of flair. But I still ended up in this like, well, what do I do now? I'm getting a degree. And I went basically to the campus recruiting portal and I looked for every type of technical job that didn't require an engineering degree. And I luckily ended up at Keyence University, which if you've been in the industry long enough, you probably know what that means. And I got into machine vision, and I just immediately fell in love with the problem solving that's required of being a sales engineer in this industry.
Wow. Good story. So you kind of accidentally fell into automation in a way.
Yep.
I think that's a lot of us do that. We don't even know the automation industry exists, and then we suddenly were in it, you know?
Yeah, I remember during college, I did a study abroad in Mexico, and I went to a Coors bottling plant down in Monterrey. And that's the first time I saw an automated production facility. And then when I applied for this job with Keyens, they showed me some sensors, and I was like, wait, I have seen this once before. This is cool. But I think also the fact that they let me, I mean, part of their interview process is to do a hands-on demo. I really like the hands-on nature of our industry. It's not just, I mean, these days I sit more behind a computer than I would like. But I did leave the industry for a while to go sell software because I wanted to make more money. And it was difficult to be away from, the physical things that I went to Pack Expo one year with really no good reason other than I wanted to hear pneumatics and motors.
That's a good place to go. Those packaging machines?
Yes.
Seriously, if you want to look at automation, packaging machines are really the epitome of automation in motion because there's so many different things going on. They really are. I love packaging machines more than any other machine right now.
Yeah.
Robots are kind of cool, but you've seen a 6-axis robot move around and pick up stuff. Some of the programmers do some really cool demos for trade shows, but in real life, they don't usually work like that way. They're usually doing really boring, mundane tasks, which is exactly what they were designed for. But when it comes to packaging machines, seeing them filling bottles, filling sleeves, filling anything, and then folding boxes, and then palletizing them and putting them, it still blows me away. I can watch packaging machines all day long and just look at the process. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of, I think it's one of those things that once you get a taste for it, maybe you don't like it, but those that like it, it's very hard, I think, to go back to some other industry where, I don't know, there's something about it that hooked me.
On that note, I'm going to take this opportunity because you talked about Pack Expo. Okay. I'm going to put a plug in for the PMMI here. So the Packaging Machinery Manufacturers Institute is one of the best industry groups in automation. So if you're listening to this show and you're in the packaging industry, check out pmmi.org for more details, but it's definitely an organization worth joining. Even if you're a single person, it's not very expensive, but the return that you get on that investment is probably about 1,000%. Such a good group there with like-minded people. So if you're in the packaging industry, look up pmmi.org and join to be part of the community. It really is a great community.
And I will say this, that they are not a sponsor of this podcast. And that's an honest endorsement from Colin. It's really true. It's a great organization, and they do a lot to spread the word on what best.
Actually, Nikki, if you get a chance with your company, it will open doors for you.
Yeah, I actually looked into it about a month ago, and it's on my on my list of things to do. And now you've pushed it pretty far up the list, I think, to make sure that happens. I'm a member of a number of great organizations in the industry already. A3, AHTD, the Association of High Tech Distribution, CSIA, the Systems Integrators Association. There's quite a few. But I've really found that as I progress in my career, becoming involved in these organizations has been huge. So I will make a point to join PMMI after we get off this podcast. Let's take immediate action. And if you're listening to this and you've been thinking about it too, you should just go ahead and take immediate action on that as well.
And if you need a contact, get in touch so I can give you the right person to talk to about that.
All right. We're getting some business done here.
This is moving around. Now, Nikki, let's find out about, first of all, I want to come back to Automation Ladies, but first I want to find out where you're working now, how your career has brought you to where you are this moment and what you're doing now. And then we'll go back to your podcast prowess, which I know is exceptional. Go.
I am a director of business development for WinTech USA, or WinTech as I thought it was called before I joined them, or WayneTech if you're in the maybe Asian part of the world. I've heard it called WinTech, whatever people want to call it, whatever they like. It's WEINTEK, and we have a U.S. company here based in Seattle, And our CEO, Oscar Rojas, approached me at an industry meeting last year. And I had heard great things about them. They were one of the few companies shipping product during COVID. I remember talking to Keith Moyer, our VP of sales, over the phone, and he's like, yep, we got this in stock in Seattle. You need it now? And I don't know how many I was making. I was working for a startup in the supply chain space during that time. And I was calling distributors and everybody for, customers trying to find these last few pieces that were keeping machines from shipping out and everybody from getting paid. And it was a real thing. And that's when I got in touch with WinTech for whatever reason. I found, Keith was on LinkedIn, and I found out that some of the systems integrators in my community really like using them because they're incredibly well priced and are kind of the most interoperable HMI on the market that's not tied to, any big manufacturer's specific ecosystem, which makes them really perfect for machinery OEMs because you don't necessarily know what kind of plant your system's getting dropped into or what it's going to need to communicate with or what kind of SCADA it's going to have to send data to, right? And honestly, I'll say when I was thinking about last year making a change, because I worked with this startup when I started with them, it was one of my old colleagues from Festo, Roman Piche, the CEO of Copium, that hired me there. And I was the first employee. That was a really interesting experience. First employee before we really had a mature product. We raised some money and they're in the e-commerce world for distributors now. And I had a really amazing 3.5 years with them. But I told him up front, I was like, I can't do the same thing for too long. I was like, you've probably got a 3-year commitment in me. And at about 3.5, I was like, okay, I think, it's about time. And I also tend to go a little hard. I go hard. So I had been working way too many hours and, the podcast got popular. And yeah, WinTech, they really surprised me as a, relatively small company for our space. They also have a relatively small product line for what I'm used to. We've got 52 hardware SKUs and a handful of
That's
a few
great.
others that go with that. But, compared to the catalogs I used to have at any, like Festo, I remember back in the day, and I'm dating myself here, but we had a CD because it was like too big to fit in a printed catalog. Yeah. But people weren't going to the websites yet either.
No.
I really am also, I have a bit of a personal brand, right? So I've gotten to know some people on LinkedIn. I go to a lot of these associations. I try to just make genuine connections with people in the industry. So when I did know that I was looking for, potentially another job, there's quite a few options available, big companies, or did I want to maybe go to a recruiter or whatever? But it just worked out that the CEO of WinTech reached out to me before anybody knew I was even open to a new job. And they really impressed me with their tiny but amazing product line. And I also realized I don't always need to be reinventing the wheel, right? And after a turn at a startup where I'm now looking for a little bit more balance, spending a little bit more time with my family, working for an established company that's been manufacturing a product, a specific niche product for 30 years, it's really refreshing to be able to do something very specific and do it really well and not have to be doing something brand new that you're trying to prove, right?
So that brings a question to my mind. So you've got an agnostic HMI that works with Rockwell, works with Siemens, works with Beckhoff, works with Omron, whoever else I missed out there, probably is not one of the main players. But how do you persuade your potential customers, your prospects, to ditch the paired connection of the PLC and the HMI of the same manufacturer?
Great question. I actually, when I first started on my first day, I scraped the internet for everything that anybody has ever said about WinTech HMIs. And I tried to use the user's words rather than my own, because I would be disingenuous to tell you that I, as a machine builder, I know what's best for you. I have this experience. I don't. I've been in this space for a long time. I've worked, in factories or with machine builders, OEMs as my customers before, but I can't say that I live and breathe their world. And so I went and I found reviews and Reddit posts and PLC forum posts because I wanted to know, and I did a little bit of this research before I joined, WinTech as well, but I went down a rabbit hole and I put together a testimonials page sourced completely just from existing word of mouth on the internet. And the
Great idea.
posts say things like, well, it's easier to talk to a WinTech HMI than a than an actual AB one from the PLC. Or we have, a lot of cases it's, oh, we've switched to all WinTech because of, trying to cut costs. Or then we don't want the licensing fees, right? The OEMs don't want to pay licensing fees. They don't want customers to have to pay licensing fees. And so there really is, it's one of those things that I had a hard time believing, because usually you can get, 2 out of 3 things, right? Fast, cheap, or good.
Yeah.
This is, and if we did a lot of automation stuff, this would probably not be true anymore if we were like a big line that did try to do everything. But with WinTech HMIs, you literally can get all 3.
Wow.
The pricing is incredible. Plus or minus like $100, it's about $100 per inch. And, you can go lower than that if you don't need a lot of features. You can go a little bit higher than that if you want really high end, but that's about what you're paying.
Okay.
It's really incredible. And they're stocked in Seattle, shipped next day. And they've been manufacturing them for 30 years. And if you compare the specs of anything comparable in the same price range, it just blows you away. Or the pricing is sometimes, in some cases, like 70% cheaper than these big lines that you're talking about. And when there's a driver for literally every PLC out there, yes, there may be some quirks or, things to change in your development environment, but the software is completely free and people can download it without buying anything. There's no gatekeeping with that. And all the training is free on YouTube, which I, as a millennial person, I've been constantly complaining that like manufacturers should do less of this gatekeeping. I want to see the data sheets. I want to see the training material. I just let me see it and then make my own decision. Like, I want to walk into a car dealership. I already know what I want. I don't want a guy on the lot trying to tell me what's best for me.
Or a computer store, right?
Yeah. So that's kind of why I thought, hey, this is something that I can really believe in. And if the users out there anonymously on the internet, not being paid to say anything and, not being hit up by their sales buddy to give a good review,
Right,
are saying this kind of stuff, then I'm going to go ahead and believe it and feel comfortable repeating that sort of stuff to other people.
I have a couple of follow-up questions because I'm really interested in learning a little bit more. One, obviously, you mentioned SCADA, so you must have some SCADA functionality, but come back to that one in a second because it's going to be a longer answer. The quick answer that I personally would like to know, because I've got applications that can help you straight away. I just lost. Okay, both of you just went off there for.
Yeah, I think you just repeat the question because we lost a bit of that.
Yeah. So the question is do your HMIs have a built-in web browser functionality?
They do.
Perfect. Okay, because our Q67 diagnostic gateway at Mirror Electronic displays diagnostic information for every part of your machine on a browser window. So
Perfect.
that's awesome. And the price is very attractive. If you're thinking of an 80 for $800 roughly, that's a pretty good price. So back to the second question. So talking about SCADA and IIoT and Industry 4.0 is starting to become a big thing. I think it's still more of a catchphrase than actual reality at this point. But things are starting to move in the direction that we are starting to collect the right data instead of every bit of data like we have been doing. We're actually
right. It's in the lake. What do we do now?
Right, exactly. So be a bit more selective in the data that we want to collect, and so we don't overload ourselves with every bit of data. What functionality or features do WinTech, and I'm going to say WinTech HMIs, offer?
No, that's a great question. And I, like you, have been very kind of skeptical and try to stay away from these buzzwords of Industry 4.0 and digital transformation, just because I've been hearing them for so long, and I feel like they've lost any power to be anything other than people saying buzzwords. I'm like, you clearly have never been on the plant floor if you can say that many buzzwords in one sentence and not realize how disconnected that is from, and that's maybe also my bias, always having been closer to the people doing the work versus being in the boardrooms. Although I did take a stint working in enterprise AI in boardrooms, but that was more in retail supply chain. And that's when I got, also a big look into the world of digital transformation as it relates to like ERP systems and stuff like that.
Right.
And what a cluster. I mean, these giant companies were just throwing away money hand over fist at these failed implementations of these ERP systems and stuff. So I came at it from kind of I already hate this word, right? But I did go to a conference recently called the Prove It Conference, which is a community conference centered around Industry 4.0. And it did seem a little bit more real to me while I was there. But also the honest truth is a lot of people that were there, they were like, I want to do this, but I don't know where to get started. And a lot of the presentations were very much assuming that you had a level of maturity where they were talking about this cloud tool versus that cloud tool versus this type of database. And one of the feedbacks that I got, a good connection of mine in the industry, Dylan Dufresne, wrote a little kind of review of his take on the conference, was he felt like there were solutions lacking that were entry level attainable. You're not talking already, because one of the requirements, and I really like this, it was a new conference format where the vendors had to prove their solution based off of a common actual data from a real factory that was anonymized and provided in a unified namespace. So that was kind of cool. And they had to say how long their solution took to implement, or how long their demo took to build, and then roughly what the cost was. Although when I did post one of the summaries with the cost, the company promptly contacted me and asked me to take the cost off of my post, because they were like, we were required to say that here, but we don't want to say that publicly. So yeah, we're talking, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars for all of these types of solutions. And there were a lot of manufacturers there that were like, hey, I want to figure out how to get started. So sorry, long-winded way to say, WinTech is not in the SCADA business. We're not a full-blown SCADA system, but I think there are so many opportunities for people to take steps that are valuable in and of themselves, that bring them closer to maturity and bring them closer to being able to do this vision of, supervisory control of everything, and having, being able to overlay some intelligence and AI maybe onto your production data. So what we offer is we have a small cloud suite. We have two products that go under the WinCloud umbrella. One is a secure remote access capability. So VPNing securely into your machine for remote maintenance, diagnostics, being able to make changes on the fly or support your customer, even if you're not there on site.
Great.
It's called Easy Access 2.0. It's similar functionality to an E1, but you don't need a separate appliance. So it's built into the HMI. And it's activated with a one-time activation fee of $99. No recurring subscriptions, no ongoing costs, no extra hardware to buy. And you don't have to buy it at the same time as you buy the HMI. You can activate it at any point in time later on if you'd like to make that extra investment.
Wow.
The other product is called Dashboard. Pretty simple and descriptive, but it is a SCADA-style cloud dashboarding product that lets you pull data from multiple HMIs into one dashboard, accessible in the cloud or on an app or your phone or computer, whatever. And it is also a one-time $99 activation per HMI. And it gives you 100 tags that you can collect and display, and 20 historical. And then there's a couple, you can, if you want to increase the tag count, you can buy more in $50 increments. But again, it's a one-time fee. Like we were talking about earlier, you got a tool for a lifetime license, right? Everybody is so inundated and overloaded with subscriptions these days.
With subscriptions, exactly.
It's like, how am I paying hundreds of dollars a month and I don't even remember what it is that I subscribe to, right?
Right, exactly.
And I think that customers are feeling the same thing. After all these years of everything turning into a subscription, it is really great in a lot of ways to not have to pay that CapEx. But then at the same time, you're like, how is my subscription budget just keeps growing every year, and I got to pay the maintenance fees for this, I got to pay the subscription fee for that. So WinTech has taken a hard line. We sell everything like hardware. There's no subscriptions or no ongoing fees for anything. So it's not a full-blown SCADA, but it can get you a lot of the functionality that you want without breaking the bank. And then we have, OPC UA and MQTT functionality to connect to your larger SCADA if you either have that or in the future when you want to build that. And you can have the historian having been collecting all this data already on the HMI for more local, control, OEE, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we have to talk about application.
Can you see why I was excited about this job? I was like, this is one of the best kept secrets in the industry.
I It makes sense, and it's a really good approach. And $99 is a no-brainer for most people, especially if they're spending, let's say $1,000 on an HMI,
Yep.
spending an extra $99 to get access functionality, okay, to your whole machine. I guess you can go through the HMI to the PLC that way as well, right? Or for the SCADA, for the supervisory control and collecting from multiple HMIs and multiple machines, when you think of it that way.
Exactly.
And collecting that, putting it on a dashboard so you can do your production data, you can do your scrap data, you can do your OEE, and also predictive maintenance, right? It's based on counting how many times a relay is switched, or, or how the temperature of a motor, because it's obviously starting to go if the temperature increases on the or the current increase. There's lots of ways you can do it, and those are really useful data points that are actually, when we talk about Industry 4.0, that they don't get talked about. Is the predictive maintenance, the production maintenance, and it's really simple to do. It could be as simple as a sensor, that counts boxes going off the end of the line. That will give you the data that you need to see, on that IoT side of things.
Yeah, and then you either have to bring it up to the cloud or do something local, right? And as soon as you start talking cloud, oftentimes it's like, oh, now you need IT, and you need IT implementation, and you need IT time, right? And we've kind of kept it, our side of the house is all OT, right? We expect controls engineers to be working with our stuff. We don't expect it to go into the IT realm necessarily, although we want to be prepared and make that, of course, all available, right? So just in our free development software called Easy Builder Pro, you can very quickly connect to any one of the large cloud providers. And you don't need to be an IT person to be able to do that, or go to your IT department and have some sort of big expenditure. Again, if you're just looking at your piece of the world, right? Your lines or your machine, anything that's connected to that machine, you should be able to do all of that as a controls engineer within the realm of what you have to control and access.
So, Nikki, if anyone's listening to this and they're interested in finding out more about WinTech HMIs, where do they go?
I would love for you to go to wintechusa.com. It's our US website here. And we also have a great YouTube channel. WinTech USA on YouTube is WEINTEK. Our factory in Taiwan has also a great website. That's the global website. That's just wintech.com. And they also have a YouTube. But as we're finding, more and more companies are we want to tailor our content as we do more content, right? We have apps engineers that do lives on YouTube to answer questions. We have like 4 of them scheduled this month that are just, hey, how to do this, or come ask your questions live. We want that to be more geographically, segmented, so you're not having to talk to someone overseas or at a weird time. So that would be the place to go, is WinTechUSA.com. Or find us at Automate. We're going to be exhibiting at Automate this year in Detroit. That would be a great place to come see us in person. Come, touch. I know engineers want to touch and feel their stuff. So you can try out the software for free, and you can simulate all day long, and you can connect to your PLC, write your program, whatever. You can do all that without buying anything. But then usually there comes a point where you want to touch the thing. You want to see how quickly does it boot up when I turn it on, right? Do I have to wait when I press this button? And some of the new features.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've got these new capacitive touch HMIs now that they act like a phone or a tablet, and they actually have vibrational feedback or haptic feedback. So when an operator touches a button on the HMI, they can actually feel that they touched that button. That's pretty cool.
Awesome for an operator, especially because how many times you get to the point where you're banging an HMI because you don't know. There's been no indication that it's been depressed, right?
Yeah.
And did it? And it's like that, and you bang it a little bit too hard. It's actually quite amazing how robust some of the HMIs are. But if you've got that tactile, you can touch it and you get the vibration back. It's like acknowledgement. It's really easy. That's cool. Yeah. All right, I'm going to go and check out WinTech HMIs when I get off of this show for sure. I've got a couple of applications I will follow up with you on, and certainly be talking to other people while I'm out there about the potential.
Yeah, thank you. And we love partnerships. I think, being a manufacturer that specializes in what we do best, it really, puts us in a great position to partner with everybody else, because we don't need to be stepping on your toes and building, making the whole line of everything. We want to do what we do well. And I think we found out during COVID too, that those that just white label everything, they have no control or very little control over the supply chain, right? And then you end up kind of being last in line for your own product if you're not the one that actually manufactures it. And so not to say that that's a bad way of doing business in any way, shape, or form, but I think with, sort of some of the uncertainties in our world and supply chain disruptions, it is nicer to have more control of that. So being able to just change out a chip and continue to produce parts if something, isn't coming through, it's nice to, I think, it at least made me think I want to deal with a company that does something and sticks to a lane and does it really well, which is something that personally I have a really hard time doing. So I respect it when other people can.
You
or
have
companies.
with one thing. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes. If you ask me what my favorite food is, it's a buffet. Or what's my favorite color, it's a rainbow. Because I cannot.
That is a special form of ADHD. I get that. This is very interesting. No, I will say this. This is a compliment that's coming, by the way, which is, we all as human beings, and I think I'm going to be tapping into your psychological analysis pre-podcast kind of things, but I found that human beings have a certain appetite for things to be the same and for things to be different. Yeah. And there's a line there. And when we get off that line, like everything is too topsy-turvy and changing all the time, we get stressed. But to me, even worse is if it's just the same all the time. And I think that intelligent people, it's even a higher aptitude for, give me more, I want to learn more, I want to do more. Is there more out there for me? Let me go deeper. And this has been great to talk to you so far, because I see that that's how you operate. You really have that appetite for show me something new, which leads me to a comment about sales in general. Now, I've said this on other episodes, by the way. And by the way, I will comment at this point that this is the best sales-based I've ever had on a podcast. I think there's going to be a lot of people who listen to this going, let me look this WinTech up. This looks pretty good. You're going to have some sales from this. You can mark this down in your CRM that this was a sales call. Now, getting back to how people operate, I think that we all have this desire to do something creative. Everyone's creative, is my opinion. But people don't understand how creative an effort that sales is. And that sales is, no one's going to sell you. You do A, B, C, and D, and you have a sale. It is a nonlinear kind of activity. So tell me about that.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that? And tell me about your sales, like how you go about finding that next customer. Besides podcasts, by the way.
This is why I'm a terrible salesperson. I'm good at it and I'm bad at it at the same time. So hear me out.
Okay.
Starting out my career at Keyence, it was actually, they even asked an interview question that it was like, because most people coming in have no real world experience. Like they're coming right out of college. So they're like, give me, they ask questions about like group projects and give me a time that you've done this. And then they asked a question. They said, if you were given the choice, you took a class and you could have a professor that just gave you one big test at the end of the semester and everything was self-paced. One big project, one big test, or somebody that gives you a weekly quiz and then monthly tests and then everything kind of builds up. And I was like, oh, I'll do it at my own pace. Thank you. Because I had been working as an intern for many years at that point, but with a lot of autonomy, working on a lot of different projects. I shipped a lot of stuff that was out in production, as crazy as that sounds, like having done that in middle school and high school. And they were like, oh, that's the wrong answer. Here, we are very structured. You know, the Japanese way, right? It's like they have a formula for everything. And it's not about you as a person. It's about you following the formula. And so I, being the type of person that I am, heard that I got the wrong answer to that question. And I went, well, just because I haven't done that before doesn't mean I couldn't be good at it. Let me try that. And so...
Great answer.
Yeah, I
Great
worked
response.
for 3.5 years in an extremely formula-based environment, which was make this many cold calls on a Monday, 80 before 10 a.m., so that you make sure that you have this many sales calls during the week and this many applications that you've shown and this many demos that you've shown, because it's all about those numbers, right? And their thing, which I appreciate in many ways, is it's less about just meeting your goal at the end of the month as it is for them to see that you're following the process. Because then if you're not following the process and you're not hitting your goal, it's pretty clear what you need to work on.
Yeah.
But if you're not hitting your goal and you're still following the process, they give you a lot more, I think, leeway just in terms of you can continue to work on it. They'll work with you. but they're all about this process. So I got really lucky that I started out with extreme use of CRM, segmenting customers, segmenting applications, so that I could call the right person about the right thing, right? And I learned this very early on, but it's very process driven, right? And you have to have a lot of conversations and you have to hear a lot of no's, right? Just to even get a sales call, you call, 20 people for one person to give you a maybe. So I'd say I was very lucky, and it's a great place to start your career to do that. I, on the other hand, didn't enjoy the pure process of it. I enjoyed the results and the problem solving and the relationships. And I would say, what kept me at that job for so long was that the vision systems were new at the time. They were newer. We were always trying to solve a problem that a sensor couldn't solve or some other system couldn't solve. Because why else would you pay for this stupid, expensive, hard to configure thing, right? So I was very much at kind of like problem solving all day, every day. And that really kept my brain extremely stimulated. And then every time a new vision system came out, I got to spend my Saturdays at a coffee shop, learning, doing example programs so I could teach the rest of the sales people in my office. And then over time, as I got, into a little bit more mature sales roles with less oversight, it became maybe more of an emphasis on relationships. Keynes was very no relationships. Like, it should not be about you whatsoever. Don't take anybody to lunch. Don't give them a branded pen. The technology and your persistence in the process should sell, right? But
Very
in America,
Japanese.
you realize my customers were trying to take me out to lunch and I wasn't allowed to take them. And it was kind of, a little bit awkward because I'm like, oh, I would love to go to lunch with you, but I can't pay for that. And then I realized that customers, people just are relationship driven, right? If they enjoy you as a person, if they think they can trust you, if they think that you are somebody that, they can get good information from, they want to keep that relationship. So
Interesting.
throughout my career, I have really relied on those relationships and the introductions that they've brought me. Because people still call people, maybe not today, because I've changed phone numbers a few times, but people still call me 10 years later to ask my advice about a Keynes vision system that I didn't sell, but somebody else did, because they trusted what I had to say. And to me, that's how that's a lot of the joy that I derive from the job. Number one is the problem solving. And usually if you solve somebody's problem and you do it with integrity, they want to have a relationship with you.
Yes.
Right. And then it's, I enjoy a lot of the people. And early on in my career, I had to smile and nod and try to sell to everyone. And now I've realized that, I don't necessarily have to do that anymore. I can kind of choose more so who I want to spend time with, who is worth going after as a relationship, whether that's a customer or a partner or whatever. But because I am also so ADHD, I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of projects I want to do. I see value in a lot of different activities, different types of partnership relationships, different ecosystems, different associations, where maybe it's not as easy to say, I'm going to get 10 leads out of this activity, right? I've now gotten to a point where when I got approached about a territory sales position, I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that's the job for me anymore. I don't think I'm not going to be able to stick to that lane and do the follow-up that's required to just do what would be the pure kind of sales engineer role. And I've gotten, I guess, lucky enough that I have built up my reputation, my relationships, to where I don't have to just take any job that comes my way. And so I was very clear with WinTech, and they thankfully, see potentially the value in working with me on this level, to where my job is a little bit what I make it. It's not necessarily a preconceived job description that you would have people send in their resume for, right? And I think as we get older and maybe more established in our careers, we start to learn more about ourselves, what our strengths and weaknesses are. And I've gotten a lot better about just admitting and wanting to be upfront about those things, and then looking for good fits rather than trying to fit myself into a box. For instance, when I graduated college, I put detail-oriented on my resume because it's one of those things that you're supposed to be, right? And I can be extremely detail-oriented when I'm really interested in a thing, but in many, many other contexts, the details are like, oh, forget, leave that for later. We'll figure that part out. That part will work out, whatever. Granted, I've never been one of those salespeople that leaves those details to the engineers and pisses them off because I sold something that actually doesn't make sense or can't be done. I've always been careful of that. But as I've gotten to know myself better in my career and I've gotten more feedback from more people, I found that I can be really useful and really valuable in certain types of roles, and others I have maybe, at this point have kind of left behind because they're not the best fit for me.
Nikki, you said something there that resonated with me personally, and it was basically you said when you help someone solve a problem with integrity, they want to have a relationship with you, and it's absolutely true. And as sales engineers are better at doing that than people that haven't got the engineering background.
Yeah.
And it's someone asked me, how do you do sales? It said basically find someone with a problem you know you could solve and help them solve it.
Yeah, and sometimes your product solves the problem and sometimes it doesn't. But I think the hallmark of a good sales engineer is not being too laser focused on selling your thing. Like that will come and it should come.
Exactly.
But sometimes the answer is my thing isn't the right thing and I'm going to recommend something else to you or introduce you to someone else. And then that comes back around later because now this person trusts that you have integrity, not to just push your product, right?
I've done that so many times in my career. It's never come back to bite me. It's always worked out that person called me next time. They needed something they couldn't find. And I've given them the answer, an honest answer. And it really does resonate with the customer when you do that. They had a chance to sell me, something in their product base, but they chose not to. And I mean, I still do it today. I mean, Mirror Electronic doesn't make the best of everything. And there are, manufacturers out there that make some products, not very many, but a few that, are better than ours. And I'm not scared to tell them that, that solution is better than ours, because if I don't, and they find out that I knew that beforehand, they won't buy anything from me again. Right? It's simple. And integrity as well. I mean, integrity was a key word there. Sales has a bad rap for people not having integrity. So I think in our industry, and I've seen it in our industry more than any as I've not got much experience in many other industries, but in our industry, there seems to be a lot of integrity about proving that your solution works, which is what you would have done at Keyence, right? A lot of the time.
Oh yeah, we shipped out the demo units and put it on the line and had to run it for a day.
Exactly.
So there was no hiding behind, it works in the catalog,
You know what though? There was a company called DVT. It might have been before your time.
No, I remember them.
I remember them too.
They were only two players in town. It was Cognex and DVT. Okay, and DVT went around and told everyone they could solve their problems with their vision, and probably 8 times out of 10 they lied about it, and
they burned not only themselves but vision technology in general, right?
Got a really bad name because, you said it would work, but it didn't work. But hang on, that wasn't me. That was another company. And it's taken a long time for Vision to be able to recover from that poor salesmanship in the beginning with DVT. And they were the bad ones for it. But it's moved on a long way since then.
And one of the things I do care about now, as I've experienced a number of different companies in the industry and different cultures, is the industry is not a monolith when it comes to how it operates, right? And it has a lot to do with organizational culture and management. So I interviewed for a job once. It was a competitor trying to poach me. It was my biggest competitor trying to get me, the top salesperson in the territory, to come over to their side. It's a 1-2 punch, right? Get the best salesperson and also hobble your competitor. But which to me was already not something I was really interested in. It seems disingenuous to the customer to flip-flop. Although, the reason I considered it is because that product had genuine strengths for certain applications, and so did mine. But they asked me, what would you do if a customer was about to give you a PO for something that it wasn't the best solution? Ooh. And I said that I would tell them to go buy my competitor and call me next time. And they said, wrong answer. We want you to take that PO. Yeah. And there are companies, plenty of them, in this industry and others that operate that way. And I would say that also in manufacturing, when we think about our customers, the ones that are giving automation a bad name by implementing automation quietly to then lay off operators and, things like that, right? There are, in my opinion, and of course there's always shades of gray, right? But there are kind of right ways to do this and there are wrong ways to do this. And the companies that do it the wrong way, they not only shoot themselves in the foot, but they infect the ecosystem around them with this negative experience that they impart on people. And I think the automation world has suffered from this in popular culture for a long time, which is terrible implementations of automation that either were overpromised by a salesperson and never really worked, or management, kind of took it with the wrong ROI calculation in mind and, came in and short-term thinking, hey, I'm going to lay off these people and put in this robot. And we've suffered in a lot of ways as an industry for a lot of this practice for a long time. And it kind of sucks because I want to tell people how great this industry is and that more people should come into it. Young people, underrepresented people that maybe don't see themselves in this industry. And I want to shout from the rooftops about how great it is. But I also have to be realistic. It's also crap sometimes. But I think what I've seen now, having kind of been around, is that there are great companies to work for in this industry and great customers to sell to. And then there's ones that I would happily let them not automate so they can go out of business and not be around for the next decade.
Wow.
And let the ones that actually care and have a good culture and want to do things the right way attract all the talent and build up our economy.
Wow.
Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, there are manufacturers out there that do abuse people, and salespeople from manufacturing companies that are there, honestly trying to help them, and they get treated like crap.
Yep.
And we all know who those companies are. So I won't name any names.
Right. I like to focus on the positive. Sorry, I went on a little high horse rant there.
No. All right. So great conversation.
I want to ask you about this because I don't want the time to be gone before I find this out. I really want to know this about you. So you are helping your customer. Selling has become a bad word, I think, in a lot of arenas. It's more solutioning than selling. I think we can all agree. I want to understand about automation ladies and your online presence, your personal branding, and how that informs, or does it inform, your ability to be a voice for your customer in your role, and how that works together. So go off on that.
Good question, Craig.
Yeah. I think so. One thing that a strong personal brand, and I'll speak for myself in the way that my personal brand has evolved, which has just very much been just me, what I say, I don't plan much of my content. I don't look at what performs well. I don't think what does an audience want to hear. I kind of say what I want to say, and I talk to the people I want to talk to on the podcast and have conversations that I want. And then what I'm thinking is it will attract the type of person that has something in common with me, or that would maybe like to do business with me. And it will probably let some people self-select as someone that doesn't want to have to do business with me, or doesn't want to be in my orbit. If they really find me, find my voice annoying, or they don't agree with the things I have to say, then they're welcome to do business with somebody else. There's plenty of work to go around. And I don't suffer from a scarcity mentality. I think the pie is getting bigger for all of us. And I think back to my early days as a sales engineer, where I would just remember like a lunch where I was sitting around a table and the owner of this, manufacturing company was spewing all kinds of things that I thought were hurtful and hateful, and I didn't want to listen to it, but I had to. And I, smiled and nodded, and I was like, hope you give me a PO at the end of this. And I don't want anyone to be in that situation. I don't think that it's healthy for us to, try to force ourselves to be around things that are not healthy for us. And so for me, I found that as I've gotten more confident in myself, and I know that there are options out there for me, I'm a little less scared of this, but I would rather me be myself, and people then when they meet me in person, they feel and see the same thing as they got from me online. I don't have a facade or some sort of made up personality. And then it has really helped open doors. Some people have no idea who I am, and I say, I have this podcast, and they're like, oh, really? What's that? And then it has no effect, right, whatsoever. I'm walking into that room just as unknown as I was before, or you get that same, I have to cold call or, try to talk to someone. But as I've gotten, more and more connections in the industry, I get a lot more introductions, for one thing, because people, they trust me. And they've either actually done business with me in the past, or they know somebody that has. So it's not only, if I think if I only had an online personality and didn't actually do the work, I think it would also be different. Because people actually know, oh yeah, I know you from Keyan's back in the day, or so-and-so worked with you, right? That helps kind of connect the two dots of like the real world and the online personality. But I found like some of my sales guys, they're like, hey, I've been telling my customers that you joined us, and they're like, who? Everybody's excited. And like, who do you not know? And that's been pretty cool, because if they somehow see our content and they like it, or they agree with something that we're saying, right? That, hey, we want more young people and women in the industry. We are trying to help with that. They find some way to connect with me as a person, even if I maybe haven't gotten a chance to meet them yet. And again, if they see something that they like, they're going to be excited. If they absolutely think that, the industry is fine as it is and no new blood needs to come into it and we have no problems and, we couldn't do anything better. And trust me, there are those people out there. They're not going to want to take my call. And you know what? That's actually better for me, because it wastes less time for me trying to do business with people that don't want to be around me, or vice versa.
No is really good in the sales process, that you don't have to waste any more time on there. Or, they're looking for the cheapest price and that's all they're interested in.
Yep.
And those customers I pass on and say, you know what, my competitors can have those, no problem.
This is the first time I've been able to say you need the cheapest price. I still got you, but I agree with your point nonetheless.
Well, it's not price that matters, Nikki. It's the value that you're getting, right?
So when somebody does say that, it's a big red flag for me. Even if I do have the cheapest price, or I can, right? It's then do I even want to, right? If that's the only lens you're looking at this from, then that also means that, there's no loyalty. There's nothing that my service or my relationship or my integrity can bring to the table. And then as soon as somebody else has a cheaper price, we've wasted again all this time, right? So I think it's important to look at more factors for sure.
It's subjective. Some people, can't afford to pay $5,000 on an HMI.
Yep.
Okay, when they can get one for $1,200. It does everything they want and has the same warranty. Software is free, or software is very low cost. There's no annual license. There's a lot of value to be had at $1,200 as opposed to $5,000, right? The difference is so vast at that level. What are you getting for $5,000? You're buying a name a lot of the time.
But right? I do like to talk about value rather than price, because even if it is the cheapest price, you don't want to be getting a cheap product that won't last or won't work just because it's cheap, right?
Exactly.
In our industrial world, that's also like literally the last thing that you want, which is why we're not all running on Raspberry Pis these days, even though we probably could, right? Because unfortunately, this stuff has to have like 100% uptime in a factory environment.
Of course.
Which, when I started selling cameras and we were charging like 20 grand for 5 megapixels, and consumer grade cameras are, it blows most people's minds. But there's a lot of nuance to our industry that people don't know, which is why I think so many VCs, like right now, Y Combinator's they're like a big accelerator for startups out of San Francisco. They've set their sights on manufacturing now as the new focus of their companies. And
right,
I kind of chuckle because I've lived in both of those worlds a little bit. And when people with no manufacturing experience whatsoever think that their new software is just going to solve all of our problems, it just makes me laugh. I feel bad for them. They're in for a rude awakening.
So manufacturing's got sexy again because of the automation.
The back office was the back office for the longest time. And then when everything went to hell, maybe we should invest in this now. I love it. I found myself, only by the grace of God, in this industry. A guy, when I was working, said, "Hey, come over to the supply chain side, this intralogistics things." And this is a guy who'd seen me do something that he felt like I was competent. I hope he wasn't disenchanted, but anyway, I came over and it changed the world for me, and that was back in 2017. I love being in this space, but I want to get back to something you've been saying along the way. What I've recognized is there's an integrity in you, Nikki. And that word integrity is that you're integrated, in that what you say is what you do. You know what you know. You're going to say your yes is yes, your no is no. And I think that that's a great message I would give to anybody, particularly somebody younger starting their career, who may be insecure about, hey, I'm supposed to know everything. I got this degree. I'm coming out of college. I should know all the answers. That was me back when I was in my 20s. And now my favorite word is no, or I don't know.
Right. Or I don't know, but I know who to ask.
I will get the answer for you. And you start working with people. That trust is a byproduct of you being exactly who you are and not holding back about it and not apologizing about it. And I think what I'm hearing from your answer to the question is, when you bring forth your knowledge and your experience and say, here it is, like it or lump it, there will be people who says, no, 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 I want something cheap, or no, 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 I want this. Fine, that's not your customer. They can work with somebody else, right? But the
Exactly.
ones who say, oh my God, I like this gal, I want to work with her, and you have a lifelong customer now. And I will find that, and I hope you do too, way more valuable than the 80 calls you would do to people who don't know you and will never talk to you again just to make the numbers. That is the more enlightened
Yeah.
approach. I will tell you, and I think Colin's nodding, he's saying the same thing.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head, and I like that, like it or lump it. I haven't heard that for a long time, that expression. So very good on that one. But yeah, Nikki, what Craig says there is absolutely true. What you see is what you get, and I can bring you value. If you're interested in hearing about how I can do that, let's have a conversation. If you want the cheapest price, maybe I can still help you if I'm with WinTech, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But cheap is not necessarily inferior or worse. In your case, you're able to offer value at a lower price than what they're used to. And it really comes based on what they're used to paying.
Yeah.
If everyone was selling at the same price, yours wouldn't be cheap anymore, right?
Right. And this is the first time I've been put in the position to have to sell something that's free, in the sense I have to defend that it's not bad because it's free. Like, it's actually really good, and it is free.
Yeah.
But I have to sell people on the fact that it's free and it's still valuable, right? And it's funny, like when I worked in my last job, I was working kind of I did a lot of sourcing for components. Not because it was my job, but because I was trying to help those buyers. I was trying to sell them something eventually, but they weren't ready for what I was selling because they had bigger problems. So I tried to help them with those problems, and I became a buyer and a sourcer and a purchasing person. And coming from the sales side, it was kind of hilarious to me how hard it is to be a buyer. And I never thought that. I always like, well, the hard part is the selling. Who wouldn't want to take my money if I'm a buyer? But you know what? It's actually strangely difficult to also be on the buying side of the equation. So I also think there's just a lot to be said about getting a little glimpse into other people's shoes. And, whether that's through traveling, trying out, different positions, or even just working with other people in other positions with like a learning mindset. You can learn from anyone around you, whether that's the person sweeping your floors or the person buying from you or the person, whatever. And I've been really lucky to be able to learn from a lot of different people inside and outside the industry. So one of my favorite things to think about in terms of like how I can bring value is maybe connecting dots that other people wouldn't see or wouldn't know because they haven't, kind of been in all those different places that don't make sense. But it's funny because like over time, it does make sense. And like you were saying, Craig, it's a non-linear kind of journey, because for me, my career has been very non-linear. Colin, I know you looked me up initially and you were like, interesting, with like a little hint of like strange, which is totally true.
I didn't say strange.
No, I read that, and that's maybe just me projecting, but I read that from your face a little bit, and it's totally true. When I made some of my career changes, people were like, what the heck are you thinking? I went from, machine vision to motion to electromagnetic simulation software, which is used in the design of electronics. So I work with PhD engineers that are designing things like antennas and phones and chips. And then I went into enterprise AI in the supply chain, predicting demand for movies that haven't been released so that we can know how many DVDs to ship to Walmarts and Best Buys. And I worked for a hardware startup that did safety devices out of Oakland for a little while. I sold to campus cops. I mean, I've tried things that were interesting to me that didn't really necessarily have a common thread. But then as technologies converge, it all converges over time. So now automation and AI and supply chain and robotics and simulation, digital twins are basically the next generation of the type of simulation that we were doing on a product level.
Mm-hmm.
Now all these things, they make a little bit of sense together. And my international business degree that I had no business with back in the day when I first started my career now is helpful.
It's kicking in.
So I would also say, I would also say to those out there that are early on in their career, if you're afraid of not knowing everything, saying I don't know and then finding the right answer for your customer is your biggest strength, because they don't have the time or the know-how of who to go to, and you do. You've got your apps engineers, right? If you're in sales, lean on your applications engineers and make sure that they like you. Get them to like you no matter what, because if they don't support you, you're going to be in for a rough time as well, right? They need to know that you respect what they do, that you don't know better. They will teach you. But then everyone will teach you if you have the humility to tell them that you're learning. And that's one of the big things that I learned too, is like the more you talk about what you're interested in learning, the more people come out of the woodwork that want to help teach you that thing. But if you just come hand out, like, teach me, help me, with, with no kind of, you don't bring any value, they don't see how hard you're trying, nobody wants to help you. There's 100,000 people on LinkedIn with their hand out every day saying, give me a job, help me with this, right? But if you are genuinely curious and you want to work hard, you show that to people. Don't be afraid to show them how hard you're working to get better. Not that you have to be good already.
I think you said something there. There's an acronym for it, RTFM. Read the manual.
Yeah.
So
start there first.
Asking someone for help, there's the answers in the manual
is
not very good. And we deal with Germans, so they don't answer questions. If the answer's in the manual and you ask them a question that the answer's there, they don't answer it. They just ignore you, or they just reply with RTFM.
One of the things I had no idea would be a selling point for WinTech HMIs, and I'm sorry I keep coming back to this, but you can tell I'm passionate about it, is that it has an 1,100 page manual. And engineers love that. It has everything in the manual.
Wow, 1,100 pages? That's for an HMI?
Yes.
That's unheard of. Wow.
And we have our own. It's internal still, because it does get things wrong occasionally, so we're still testing it. But we have a WinBot that answers questions from the manual.
There you go. Thank you.
Like a ChatGPT.
There you go. So I've got a question for you. I can't resist asking this.
Yeah.
When you buy something, a technical product, okay, for yourself in your personal life, do you read the manual before you start pushing buttons and playing with it?
I have actually started to try to do that. Yes. Not always. I don't always default to reading the manual first, but I also don't just immediately throw it away and assume I don't need it. And I've grown up with a lot of like IKEA. I would consider myself a fairly professional IKEA, like furniture putter together, whatever that is. I could be hired out on Thumbtack. If I didn't have a job, I would just go assemble furniture all day long. Not a problem. The instructions are right there.
That is going to be a soundbite.
Honestly, I feel like nowadays we have YouTube for that too. Like there will be somebody that will teach you step by step how to do almost anything in this world. So there's no excuse for not at least trying. Like I fixed my own garbage disposal at my apartment instead of when I called maintenance and they were like, that's your problem. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and I figured it out.
And you still have your hand?
I do. Yeah. My husband was like, let's just get a new one. Not to say he normally is the one that fixes things, but in this instance, he was like, no. And I was just like, I can look it up on YouTube. I've also like taken apart the wrong part of the washing machine that wasn't possible to put it correctly back on after I looked up the wrong manual. So, you don't always want to just go for it.
You lose some.
You win some, you lose some.
I think we have our title, by the way.
But I think if you talk to any controls engineer or like machine builder out there that's been around the block a few times, ask them how many things they've, if they've ever produced magic smoke from their panel or burnt out a motor. I don't think you can really say that you've been in this industry and done something of real worth if you haven't messed a few things up sometimes.
I love that, Nikki. I love getting
with full
together
safety
with
in mind,
guys.
wearing your PPE, right?
Where is it that, and in fact, this is the one I like to ask, which is, what is the worst disaster that you have caused in your career? Not just been around, but actually caused.
Ooh.
And if people have a few beers and they'll get a little bit transparent and they'll say, yeah, there was this time. And they'll tell a story. And we all learn from that because we'll never do that again. But that's the best learning. I found that there just isn't any degree that teaches you automation. You start learning when you're in the field, right? And you've got an operations guy standing over you going, is it done? Is it done? How long is it going to take till it's done? Could you get it done? And you're reading a manual and you're trying to figure it out and you're calling tech support, and you will learn faster than you've ever learned in your life. And when you do that for a while, you get pretty good, and you kind of get, yeah, that smells like that's going to burn out. You're going to have to fix that. Or I know how to get after this kind of thing. It's an Ethernet based thing or whatever. And I think that's what makes this such a beautiful industry, in that for learners like us, and I'm going to try and put myself in your same category, which is I learned it completely on the fly. I remember becoming a servo expert. I had never done servo motors in my life, and I became this servo specialist for a distributor earlier in my career. And I read manuals, just like Colin said. I read, read, and I got in, and I started answering questions, and I got after it, and sales went 10x in just 2 years. I really like your approach, and I think that there's so much to be learned by this podcast. Although I think the title, you said it earlier, is going to be available for IKEA setups. That's gonna be Nikki Gonzalez available. Maybe we'll bring in some interested people. Like, what is this about?
IKEA helper available. Yeah.
I always made them backwards. I'd make the shelf upside down, and then I'd take it all apart and make it again. That's my IKEA experience. So you're probably better at that than me.
All right. So we got to wrap up here. We've been an hour. So I'm going to ask you a couple of last questions. Okay, Nikki. One of them we ask every guest. Well, there's two questions we ask every guest. So I'm going to ask both of them to you now. The first question is, what's one tool or one thing you couldn't live without now? A recommendation.
Honestly, if you haven't tried ChatGPT, I'd say spring for the $20 a month. It's really nothing compared to the productivity you can get out of it. It takes some time to figure out how to use it. So and don't ever take anything that it gives you and make that your work product ever.
No.
And also don't take any factual data or research. But once you get the hang of how to use it to format information, produce outlines, organize your thoughts, there's so many things that you can do with it that I found it to be a huge help with, like, writer's block or having a hard time getting started on a particular project, giving a rough outline of something. Or I get invited to speak at conferences and things like that. So I love for it to help me put together. There's always nuanced things that you have to do, like send me a bio that's this particular length. And, a lot of, like, kind of the admin stuff around that. I found it's a huge time saver. And I think it's also just one of the skills of being a marketable employee in the future for any job that you have. Being able to use AI in whatever fashion suits your job. And ChatGPT is one of those, entry level, easy to get tools that can do a little bit of everything. So
it's funny you mentioned that. I am going to give myself a plug. So my book, ChatGPT for B2B salespeople, is coming out in April. Yes.
Okay, I need to pre-order, please.
I will give you a review copy and I'll get your feedback on it. Seems you do have experience. I'm looking for some reviewers before it's published. So if you're interested in that,
I'm in.
Yeah, I'm nearly finished it. So it's a long book.
Well, I haven't figured out how to use it for sales yet, really, other than, some of the things I've been working on, like guides and, some collateral and different things like that. But I think there's definitely somebody out there that knows how to maximize use of it for what we do. So I'm super excited by that. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And the last question is, who would you highly recommend that we get on the show? You got to recommend another guest. It's kind of like a relay situation where one person recommends the next or one of the next guests.
Ooh. I'm just going to say the first name that popped up in my head, not because I think it's the most important person necessarily for you to talk to, but it might have been the AI related. His name is Jason Bean, and he used to work for P&F, and he is autistic, and he speaks a bit about neurodivergence in the workplace, and as well as he has a book. I'm not sure if it's a book or some lectures, or he also does a bit with AI in the manufacturing space. But he comes more from kind of the digital transformation factory overview, and he can tell you all about how he thinks, and his unique way of thinking has been a huge asset to him in the right type of job. And I think in the engineering world, there actually is a lot more, I guess, neurodivergence than in the general population, because neurodivergent people are often end up taking non-conventional ways to do things, including trying to solve their own problems instead of just asking around and seeing what solutions already exist. We tend to be very focused on creating new solutions. And I think engineering tends to suit these types of brains that are a little bit different.
Sure.
But it's not something that we've talked about a whole lot over the course of my career. And it's becoming more of an accepted topic to talk about openly. And I feel like I learned a lot by talking to him. I met him at Automate, I think, a couple of years ago in person. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Definitely. Can you put us in touch?
Absolutely.
Can you give us a connection? Okay. And talking about connections, just to finish up the show here, how do people find you?
Yes. On LinkedIn, pretty much. I'm fairly active there. And I try to say this, I make time for LinkedIn because I sacrifice all other social media. I don't spend any time on any other social media. So I do have a job and I do a lot of work, even though it looks like I'm on LinkedIn all the time. But you can find me there. I'm pretty open to connecting with anybody in the industry. As long as you're not trying to pitch me and sell me something on our first introduction, I would love to connect with you. Our website as well for the podcast, if you want to check out Automation Ladies and see if that may be your cup of tea. Our website is automationladies.io. And then you can listen on any of your favorite podcast players there. And then if I could give one more quick plug, I run a community conference along with my co-host, Ali G, and it's called OT SCADACon. It's a small community conference in Houston, Texas in July. It goes from July 23rd through the 25th, and this is our second year hosting it. Phoenix Contact hosted at their Experience Center last year, and we're doubling it in size this year, and Endres Hauser is hosting for us this year. So we hope to keep this going. It's a small community of basically anybody in the industry that wants to learn in a really friendly, kind of relaxed environment. You can learn more about it at otscada.com is our website. But yeah, those are kind of the places that I'm most active right now, and you can find me. And then, of course, WinTechUSA.com, and you can find me through those channels.
For anyone listening that's driving, we'll put those in the show notes. So
Thank you.
They'll all be in the show notes. Okay. Nikki, it's been a pleasure to connect with you. Been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Been a really stimulating conversation on here. There's a lot of nuggets and a lot of sound bites coming out of this one for sure. So just want to appreciate you and look forward to seeing you out on the road at one of the shows.
Absolutely.
And look forward to you restarting Automation Ladies. Okay, Nikki, thanks again for your time.
Thank you, guys.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Machine Builder Talk. If you enjoyed the conversation, please hit subscribe and take a moment to leave a quick review. It genuinely helps the show to grow and allows me to continue bringing more fantastic guests like Nikki onto the show. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.
Find us at machinebuildertalk.com and wherever you listen to interesting podcasts. We encourage you to subscribe and to reach out with your comments and questions. Until next time, make it great.